Hey guys, welcome back to another video. We are finally getting into our WJ knuckle swap kit. In the last video, we did all our teardown and prep work to get into our welding and fab for the kit, and after that, we're just slapping everything together.
I'm very excited for this kit. It's going to be a huge upgrade for the XJ. It's a 1-ton steering kit upgrade, and you get much larger brakes with this kit.
Let's get into it.
Sounds great.
All right guys, I just want to talk a second about the WJ knuckle swap kit itself. The two biggest upgrades on this kit, first and foremost, is going to be the 1-ton steering setup, and also with the option of running over the knuckle. It's also a high steer setup, so you gain that ground clearance. On our 1-ton steering, we do make it out of 7075 aluminum, which has memory, so if you do hit a rock, it bounces right back and you're not going to be stuck on the trail with a bent tie rod. The next biggest upgrade in this kit is the brakes. Now these are the rotors that come with the kit, and these are your factory XJ rotors. You can see the difference there. So if you have a hard time stopping, or you have 35s or bigger on there, this is a good upgrade for your brakes, and it all comes in the kit on there. Okay, there are a couple options on this kit. Like I said, you can run over the knuckle or under the knuckle. Under the knuckle allows you to keep your factory sway bar mounts and not have to mess with any of that. We are going to run over the knuckle, which does require more trimming, as we saw in the last video. Running over the knuckle, the main advantage is the ground clearance and having better angles on your steering and your track bar and your drag link. Just makes for a smoother ride, gives you that ground clearance we talked about. So these WJ knuckles come from the factory with an under the knuckle taper. So they're tapered from the bottom for your tie rod ends to bolt up to and seat. When you select the over the knuckle option, we do drill out and weld in tapered sleeves to the knuckles to run it over the knuckle. So if you're doing this swap yourself, be aware of that when you're trying to figure out your steering and what's best for you. There is a little extra fab work and drilling if you're going to run over the knuckle. But like I said, if you order a kit, we have that ready to go for you. It will come set up to run over the knuckle, and you'll just have to do some extra trimming like we showed in the last video. And then the last option on this kit is new hubs. We went with new hubs because we're in it and we're replacing it. It is a part that wears out. Okay, so with the setup of our kit, you can reuse your factory hubs. You do have to trim a little off the outside if you're going to go that route. However, if you order them in the kit, we'll do all that for you, and everything will go together without any modding to your axle hub. You can do the modification at home with a grinder. You need to take about a 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch off all the way around the hub. So in order to do that, you can take a grinder and grind about a 1/16 of an inch all the way around the hub in order for it to fit inside the rotor. But like I said, if you order those in the kit, we will do that for you. They'll be ready to go when you get it. Last point to note is you do need a special, if I can reach it, track bar. Now this is shorter than our normal XJ track bar and has a different bend. Because we are running over the knuckle and because we are relocating things, you do need a special track bar to keep your angles parallel. So if your drag link and track bar aren't parallel, you're going to get bump steers. So whether you run over the knuckle or under the knuckle, you still need the track bar that comes with this kit. Okay, so we did all our prep in the last video. The first thing I'm going to start with, I'm going to knock out the bracket and the welding. I'll show you how to do that. I like to start, there is a bit of welding you can do off the Jeep on this bracket setup. You'll box weld this, and the kit comes with a spacer here to space this out to the correct mount width. So we're going to do all this welding before we mock up the bracket. It's just a lot easier to do it off the Jeep. And then we'll hold it up and we'll do some stitch welding on the Jeep. The only thing, if you've ever welded on your axle, you just want to make sure not to get it too hot. And we'll show you how to do that. We're going to weld about 1 inch on one part of it, and then we'll move and we'll have some wet rags just to keep everything cool. We really don't want to warp our axle too or heat it up too much that we fry a seal. Luckily, the axle seals are pretty far away from where we're welding, so we just want to be careful and aware of that. So with all that said, let's go ahead and start welding. If you're not good with one hand welding, put this in a vise. Let's give it a try.
Nice.
That'll do. All right, so as you saw, we welded this on the ground just to get some of the welding out of the way before we put it on the Jeep. You gotta be careful, the welds can warp this a little bit, so just be aware of that while you're welding. You can do it on the Jeep, it's just a lot harder to get into all the places. I like to weld the whole thing. You don't have to, it really only needs a few stitch welds to hold this together. It is 1/4 inch plate, very heavy duty. Now we've done that, we did some test fitting, found that we needed to do a little more trimming here, so we took off some of the lower control arm mount. And really, we just want this to sit right up against the spring perch. And then we are gonna square it up with the top of our spring perch. So I got this angle finder. We're just gonna make sure they're square. And when I say that, we want this at 0 degrees and this at 90 degrees to that. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah. It's not that vital. There's Johnny joints on both ends of the track bar, so having it off one way or the other isn't gonna be the end of the world. It'll all line up, it'll all still bolt together. You just want your bracket centered and square with your axle. So that's what we're doing. That's why we have the angle finder out here. All right, I kind of wanted to give you a better angle over here to kind of show what I'm talking about when we're squaring with this spring perch. Ideally, if you don't have your control arms connected, you can rotate the axle till this is leveled at 0. And then you can just put this at 90 degrees and that's what you're shooting for. We're just gonna compensate a little bit. So our axle is rolled back about 3.5 degrees. So when we go over here, to our bracket, we can put it at 90, but we're also going to roll back that same 3 degrees to match the axle rotation. So we're going to go down to about 87 degrees in the counterclockwise position because we can see that our axle is rolled back. And like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can be off 3 or 4 degrees and everything will still work. But this is just a good way to square it up without having to take off your arms and make everything perfect. And if you don't have an angle finder, really you can eyeball it. This top edge parallel with that top edge is the same thing. But yeah, we're gonna hold it there and we're just gonna tack it in place and then we'll get to welding. All right, that is good enough. So we're gonna throw a tack here. Oh, other thing I wanted to mention, when you're welding on your axle, ground to the axle, don't ground to the body. You don't want all the current running through your body. It's also a good idea to disconnect your battery cable so you don't fry anything. But if you are grounded directly to the axle, most of the time you don't have any issues. Now that we got this tacked in place and got the angles where we want it, we're gonna start welding. Like I mentioned in the intro, you really wanna be aware of getting your axle too hot. You don't wanna warp the tube. So we're gonna weld about 1.5 inches on one side of the bracket, then move to the other side, do it there. Then we'll grab some cold rags and we'll kind of cool it down. You don't want to just spray water right onto it. But this is a thick bracket, it's very heavy duty, like I said. Just be aware not to get your axle too hot. Okay, we got that all welded up. I did want to mention you do want to leave this spacer in the whole time you're welding everything because your bracket can move still even though we box welded it before we started. So leave the spacer in. Now that the welding's done, we'll take the spacer out. We'll clean up these welds. I did a little extra trimming in the other video, so I'm going to actually just weld in a plate here because I don't love this. You don't have to trim as much as I did, but we'll do a little bit of fab work here. Strengthen this up, make it look good. We'll clean up all the welds and then we'll throw some paint on it. All right, like I said, this was all unnecessary. It was just kind of bothering me a little bit, and I had some scrap, so I welded it up here. This is not part of the install. You don't need to do it, but we're in here welding, and I just wanted it to look nice. Now that everything's done and in place, like I said, we are going to clean up the welds. We're going to throw some spray paint on it just so everything doesn't rust. I know everything's rusted under here, but it's just an extra step. And again, this is our beater Jeep, so we're just going to throw some rattle can on it, make sure it doesn't rust, and it'll all look good after everything's bolted on. I don't know, we're just gonna get the best we can. Yeah. Oh, got my arm. That makes more sense. Okay, now that we got the track bar bracket welded on, painted up, we are gonna move on to the actual knuckle swap. So on this, just a few things to watch out for. There are holes for grease fittings on these lower ball joints. You just wanna have them to where you can access them with a grease gun while you have the knuckle on. So don't have it pointing forward. Straight back's probably okay, or out to the side is a good option. After we get the ball joints in, we're gonna put the axle shafts in. And the other thing you wanna watch out for is, like we talked about in that first video, is just those seals inside your housing. You really don't want to ram the shaft right into the seal. You can mess it up and then you have to replace your axle seals. So we're going to try to avoid that and just gently slide them in and keep the shaft up off the bottom of the tube. Other than that, it's just assembly. After that's all done, we'll put the knuckles on, and then the kit does come with a hub flange spacer to run the bigger rotors. Thank you, Gabby. It's right here. So this is to space out your axle hub, like I said, to run the bigger rotors that are in the kit. You can weld these on. We're just going to bolt them on. It's not really that vital. And yeah, it all just goes together after that. There we go. Now that we got our WJ knuckle on and the axle shaft in, we're going to get our new hubs on. This is the flange spacer that we talked about. This just goes between the hub, the hub and the knuckle. So this spaces your hub out so you can run those bigger rotors, and everything fits nicely together. So again, I said you could weld this on. It is not necessary. This is anodized. We're just going to bolt it on right between the hub and the knuckle. And then I screwed it up with the colors. All right, guys, we got the driver's side done. We got new ball joints in, the axle shaft back in, the new hub with the spacer on, got the axle nut back on, the new caliper and the new rotors looking really good. Whole driver's side done. We're gonna move to the passenger side. Once that's finished, we get to start putting on the fun stuff. We get the high steer kit and the track bar, and really that wraps it up. So let's get to it. 7. All right, we got the passenger side done. That's all together, or we're gonna finish up with the steering and the track bar. Now, what we're looking for on the track bar, we're probably gonna run this top hole because we are doing over the knuckle, but when you're setting up a track bar and drag link, you want your endpoints, or you wanna imagine a line between your endpoints of your drag link and your track bar, and you want those imaginary lines to be parallel, if that makes sense. The track bar has a small bend in it, but if you were to pull a straight line from mount point to mount point, that's the line you're eyeballing with. Drag link straight, so that's easy to go off. I'll show you what I mean when we put it in. But we want those parallel when we set it up. We're gonna start with the track bar because the steering's out of the way right now. We'll get that bolted in. Then we'll do the steering, and then we'll be done. We're gonna do all our final adjustments. We're gonna show you how to do like a driveway alignment in the last video. We will button up with bleeding the brakes, getting this thing running, doing some trimming for the tires, and aligning and adjusting everything. So that's in the next video, but for now we're gonna get it all together and see what it looks like. And if you remember from our teardown in the long arm kit, we are saving this from the factory track bar. This nut tab of sorts is really handy. You can use new bolts, but you have to fish them in or you have to weld a plate between them. It's really hard to get a wrench on the backside, so we just reuse this. It's fantastic. So save that when you're tearing everything down. Good. All right, we're setting this up. We are gonna be off, and we're not gonna do any of the adjustments in the track bar. We talked about this several times, but we're gonna be pretty far off on this if I just bolt it in the air. But we're gonna try to push the axle over. Just keep it in there. There you go. A little bit nervous. Oh yeah. So now that we finally have this on, I wanted to show you what I was talking about. So this Pitman arm tie rod has a slight downward bend, and the track bar has a slight upward bend. So this is going to throw off your eye if you're trying to eyeball these to be parallel. They definitely don't look parallel. What we care about is mount point to mount point on both of these. So if you were to pull a straight line from here to here, and I'm going to use this bar as an example, and a straight line from there to there. Now the Pitman arm mounts under and that mounts over. So you're gonna really pull slightly offset line. I don't know, it's hard to explain. But if you were to imagine this up in a straight line, you would see that these are actually parallel, because that's what we care about is the mount points. The reason we care about that is because your track bar and your drag link, you want them to travel in sync, because when one's out of sync, you get what's called bump steer, meaning your drag link or your track bar is just traveling a little different than the other one. So when you hit a bump, you're going to feel your steering wheel jerk left or right, and that's called bump steer. And that is caused by having these out of parallel. So it's really important that you have the raised track bar mount when you are running an over the knuckle setup. Now, if you're running under the knuckle setup with this down here and this down here, we do send this kit with multiple holes in both brackets of your track bar, so you can adjust it up or down to make these two parallel so that they are in sync on your steering setup. Okay, so that's what you're looking for when you're setting up a drag link and a track bar. And if you're trying to chase bump steer, this is where your problem is. We have everything together now. We're going to torque down the steering because we can do all that adjustment, but we're going to leave the track bar and everything else. So we can do all the adjustment in the steering by just turning these tubes. So we're going to torque down the ends. So in the next video, we're going to button everything up. We're going to bleed the brakes. We're going to trim for tires. We're going to do all our final adjustments. We'll show you how to do an alignment in your driveway, the tape measure, and a friend. If you don't have a friend, you need a magnet or like tape or something. Someone's got to hold the tape measure. You can take it to a shop and get it aligned. You can do a really good job with the tape measure and a friend and a little know-how. So we'll show you how to do that in the next video. We're gonna get everything dialed in, get it back on its wheels, and hopefully driving. We'll see. Thank you once again for watching the video. If you liked it, please subscribe. It really helps us out, and we will see you in the next one.